All right. So this assignment is about the money market. And so there's a couple things we need to understand about the money market. The money market is simply the marketplace, if you will, where we demand money and the Fed supplies money. So the demand for money is made up of two components. So we can just read this: transaction demand. We'll talk about that in a second, but that's just the money we use every day as a medium of exchange when we need to buy things. That's our transaction demand. Then we have the asset demand for money, and this is just money that we want to hold on to, and we're just holding it until we find something better to do with it. So think of Scrooge McDuck. He's got that room full of gold coins. He's just holding that as an asset. He likes to dive into it, swim around, and stuff like that. If he had something better to do with it, he wouldn't hold it as an asset. So think of it that way. So these will be explained on subsequent slides. I'm not going to go into them right now. But the whole point of this unit is that the Federal Reserve will try to manipulate the money supply so that they can in turn manipulate interest rates. And so that's the basis of what we're doing. So first thing I want to point out is that the money market is made up of a demand curve and a supply curve. So the demand curve is affected by how much things cost. Okay? Just like I mentioned, we demand money to hold on to as an asset, but we also demand money to spend. So if lunch is $5, we demand this much money, everything's fine. Okay? If lunch goes up to $10, well, that means that we have to increase our demand for money in order to meet that increased price. Well, when that happens, it causes the interest rate to rise. Okay? And that's going to have a negative effect on investment and consumption and so on. So that's a big deal, okay? When the demand for money shifts, it does cause interest rates to change. And that resultant change can affect investment and consumption, and it can affect the value of the dollar, which will affect exports, okay? Now on the supply side, okay, the money supply curve is dependent solely on what the Federal Reserve does. So if the Federal Reserve wanted to bring interest rates back down to where they were, that means they would want equilibrium to be there. They would actually increase the supply of money to bring the interest rates back down. So that's kind of how the two things work together, okay? So now what we'll talk about is the demand for money and the two types of demand, okay? So first off, we have what's called the transaction demand for money, okay? This is the money we keep in our wallets or in our checking accounts, okay? And if we were solely interested in the transaction demand for money, it would actually be a vertical curve, okay? The demand for money for transactions. The reason it's vertical is because we need basically, for the most part, a set amount of money each month to pay for the things we need. So let's say this is $1,000. That means my demand for money to take care of the everyday transactions will be $1,000, okay? Now this demand is completely independent of the interest rate, okay? Interest rates can go up or down. The transaction demand remains constant, okay? However, it is directly related with nominal income or GDP, okay? Well, the word nominal means it includes price level changes. So when nominal GDP increases or the price level increases, we're going to end up having to increase our demand for money, okay? And then the third thing to note about the transaction demand is just the way we use money as a medium of exchange. So this is the money we need that we spend. Okay, so far so good? All right. Then let's contrast that with what's known as the asset demand. Okay? The asset demand for money is actually a downward sloping curve. Okay? It is related to the interest rate. As interest rates go down, we actually will increase the quantity that we demand to hold on to as an asset, okay? So here's the difference. This right here, this is money being held as an asset. You have nothing better to do with the money than to just hold it for now. Something better may come along, you may go ahead and use it later. Over here, this is a bond. This is where you're not holding the money as an asset. Instead, you're putting it into some financial investment to earn interest off of it, okay? So the point is this: when interest rates are super low, so let's say they're what they are in a savings account right now, okay, 0.25%. That means we're basically just going to hold all of our money. We have no incentive to purchase a bond or put it in a savings account. On the other hand, if interest rates were pretty high, say 20%, well, at that point, you would actually be losing money if you held on to it. Okay, holding money, you would actually be losing it because you're foregoing an interest rate. On the other hand, if you put it in a bond or in a savings account or some other vehicle, you'll be earning that interest rate, but you'll be holding less money. So as interest rates rise, okay, we're going to hold less money. So at a 20% interest rate, we're going to hold that much money, because if we end up holding a lot of money, we're missing out on that interest rate. On the other hand, interest rates are, say, 1%. We might want to hold more of our money to find something better to do with it. Okay? So that's the asset demand for money. Now, when we add those two curves together, we get what's known as the total demand for money curve. I don't remember if I have this in a... Yeah, I don't. So let me scoot that back. All right. So the asset demand for money looks like this. So at the 10% interest rate, okay, we're going to see that $100 is demanded for transactions and $0 is demanded for assets. So over here, our total demand curve for money starts with $100 at 10%. At 5%, $100 is demanded, and $100 is demanded for an asset. So at 5%, the total demand for money curve is going to set at about 200. And finally, at a 0% interest rate, we have 100 demanded for transactions, and we have 200 demanded as an asset. So at 0%, 100 plus 200 is 300. Okay? And so that's what gives us the shape of our overall demand for money curve. So again, it's made up of the asset demand and the transaction demand for money. Okay, so now I'm going to skip ahead and look at some other things. So basically, these are typical questions that you'll see in your homework. Okay, an increase in real or nominal GDP. Well, it's nominal, because nominal GDP would indicate that price level changes have occurred. So that would actually shift the transaction demand curve for money, like so. Okay? We would increase our demand because we need to pay the higher prices. Okay, just reading the graphs now. At the equilibrium 5% interest rate, the amount of money demanded for transactions is 100. So that's just looking at these interest rates. The transaction demand curve is completely oblivious to the interest rate. It doesn't matter what the interest rate is, it's always 100. Okay? On the asset side, though, okay, at the 5% interest rate, you're going to see that 100 is demanded as an asset there. So that means the total demand for money at the 5% interest rate would be 200. If the interest rate were 10%, the amount of money demanded for transactions would be 100 still, because again, it doesn't matter. But the amount demanded as an asset now is going to be 0. Okay? And the reason this curve is downward sloping is because at lower interest rates, there's a decreasing cost of holding money. Okay? If I'm holding $1,000 and interest rates are 0, what's it costing me to hold $1,000? Nothing. If interest rates are 10% and I'm holding $1,000, then it's costing me that 10%.